She mistook a millionaire heir for a waiter weeks later. He offered her a marriage contract. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The ballroom of the Veil Foundation shimmered with gold light, crystal chandeliers scattering reflections across polished marble floors. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided between tables with practiced precision. At the far end of the hall, Lena adjusted her tray nervously. She was working double shifts that night, her second job that week, trying to gather enough money for her mother's hospital bills. The dress code said black and white, but her borrowed vest was a size too big, and her shoes pinched her toes. When the violin music swelled, she hurried forward, focused on keeping her balance. That was when she noticed him tall, clean-cut, and calm amidst the chaos. He wore a simple white shirt with his sleeves rolled up, and his hands rested casually on the edge of the table, like he belonged nowhere in particular. To her, he looked exactly like another waiter who had just taken a break. "Hey," she said under her breath, half whisper, half complaint. "If you are on duty, maybe you could help instead of just standing there?" The man blinked, surprised. His lips parted slightly, as if to correct her, but he did not. A faint smile curved the corner of his mouth, and he took the tray from her hands without a word. "Of course," he said quietly. "Let me help you." Lena blinked. Thank you?" she muttered, confused but grateful as he carried the tray toward the guests. She hurried away, cheeks burning. Later that night, when the event ended and tips were counted, she overheard whispers near the exit. "That is Adrian Vale, the heir of Vale Group. He owns half of this building." Her stomach dropped. The man she had scolded for slacking off was not a waiter, he was the host. For weeks, Lena tried to push the embarrassment out of her mind. She never thought she would see him again. Until one gray Tuesday afternoon, as rain tapped against the cafe windows where she worked mornings, a familiar voice broke the quiet. "Still serving coffee, I see," Adrian said, standing by the counter, tailored suit, calm eyes, unmistakable confidence. Her hand froze on the espresso handle. "Mr. Vale," she stammered. "I look about that night, I am so—" He raised a hand. "Do not apologize," he said softly. "Actually, I came with a proposal." She frowned. "A proposal?" He slid an envelope across the counter. "I need a wife. For 6 months. It is a business arrangement. I will pay you well for your time." Lena laughed, certain she had misheard. "You want to what?" Adrian's gaze stayed steady. "Marry me. Think of it as a contract." The sound of rain filled the silence between them. She wanted to believe he was joking, but his eyes told her otherwise. Eyes she remembered, kind but guarded, belonging to a man who had everything yet trusted no one. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled faintly. "Because you are the only one who ever spoke to me like I was human." And just like that, the world that had always seemed too big for her began to tilt on its axis. Lena had no idea that her mistake at a charity gala was about to pull her into a world of luxury, lies, and a marriage that was never supposed to be real, until it was. The rain kept falling outside the cafe window as Lena stared at the envelope on the counter, her mind spinning between disbelief and suspicion. Adrian Vale, the heir she had once mistaken for a waiter, sat across from her like this. Was a perfectly ordinary conversation. "You are serious?" she asked finally. Adrian nodded once. "Completely. I need someone I can trust. My board is forcing me to marry before the end of the quarter, or I lose control of the family foundation. The tabloids are already circling after that incident at the gala. You were the only person who ever looked at me and saw a man, not a headline." Lena blinked. "So you want me to pretend to be your wife? To save your company?" "It is mutually beneficial," Adrian replied evenly. "You will be compensated well, and it ends in 6 months. Clean and professional." His calm tone only made her more nervous. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a simple written agreement and a check that could pay her mother's hospital bills 3 times over. She thought of the smell of antiseptic, the machines around her mother's bed, the soft voice that had whispered, "Do not give up on your art, sweetheart." It was impossible to ignore that kind of need. "You could ask anyone," she said quietly. "A model, an actress, someone who fits your world." Adrian's expression softened just slightly. They would play the role. You, I think, would live it. He slid a card across the counter. If you decide yes, call this number by tomorrow noon. Then he left, his umbrella cutting through the downpour like a blade. The cafe door closed, leaving her alone with the echo of his words. That night, Lena lay awake staring at the water stains on her ceiling. Every logical part of her screamed that it was madness, but logic did not pay rent or buy medicine. By dawn, she had made her choice. The next afternoon, a black car waited outside her apartment building. Inside, Adrian sat with a folder on his lap. "Are you sure?" he asked when she climbed in. "No," she admitted, "but I am here." He nodded once. "Then let us begin." He handed her a contract, printed in sharp black ink with a short list of rules. No emotional involvement. No interference with his business. Attend 5 public events together. Keep the marriage confidential until termination. She traced the last line with her finger. "And what happens after 6 months?" "You walk away free," Adrian said. "And so do I." Lena exhaled slowly, then signed. When she looked up, his gaze held something unreadable: admiration, maybe, or pity. "You will need a new wardrobe," he said, "and a background story." The next few days blurred into a storm of preparation. Tailors arrived with dresses, assistants coached her on posture and small talk, and publicists rehearsed fake interview answers. The first time she stepped out in front of the mirror wearing a satin gown, Lena barely recognized herself. "You look terrified," Adrian said behind her. "I am," she confessed. "You should not be," he replied, his reflection meeting hers. "They will only believe the lie if you do." The limousine rolled through the city toward their first public appearance together, the Vail Group charity dinner. As flashes exploded from cameras and journalists shouted questions, Lena's chest tightened. She felt his hand slide into hers, steady and warm. "Remember," Adrian murmured, "tonight you are Mrs. Vail." The ballroom doors opened, and they stepped into a sea of light. All eyes turned to them. Whispers rippled through the crowd about her accent, her dress, the fact that no one had ever heard of her before. She smiled through it all, clinging to his earlier words like armor. By the end of the night, she could barely feel her feet, but the plan had worked. The press called them the year's most unexpected couple. Back in the car, she let out a long breath. "Did I pass?" she asked. Adrian's lips curved slightly. "You exceeded expectations." For the first time, she saw him not as the heir who owned everything, but as a man who had built walls around himself so high that a simple smile could shake them. Neither of them realized that this deal, written in cold ink, had already started to burn with something far more dangerous than either had planned. The weeks that followed turned Lena's world upside down. Every morning began with a driver at her door. Every evening ended with photographers flashing from behind the hedges outside the Vail estate. She had traded the scent of coffee and dish soap for the polished air of wealth, but it did not smell like freedom. It smelled like pressure. In the marble halls of Adrian's mansion, her footsteps echoed too loudly. The staff nodded politely but rarely smiled. Everything she touched felt borrowed: her silk dresses, her jewelry, even the smile she had to wear in public. Adrian, meanwhile, seemed untouched by it all. He was calm, precise, endlessly busy, spending hours on conference calls and meetings about the foundation's future. Their conversations were polite but shallow, always circling the rules they had signed. Yet sometimes, between rehearsed smiles and red carpet appearances, something human broke through the armor. One evening, after a long charity banquet, Lena found him alone in the library, still wearing his tuxedo, sleeves rolled up, staring at an old photograph. "You work too much," she said softly from the doorway. He glanced up. "Occupational hazard. Even heirs get tired." Adrian's mouth curved faintly. "You speak like someone who thinks I chose this life." She walked closer, noticing the photograph: his parents standing in front of the Vail Group headquarters, smiling as if they owned the world. "Did you?" she asked. "Choose it?" He paused. "No. But I learned to survive it." The words hung between them, heavier than any chandelier in the house. For a moment, Lena saw not the billionaire, but a man built from expectations and loneliness. She sat across from him, uninvited, and reached for the coffee pot on the side table. "Then let us both survive it tonight," she said, pouring 2 cups. He hesitated, then smiled, a real one this time. They sat in silence, the only sound the soft crackle of the fireplace. From that night on, the distance between them began to shrink in small, invisible ways. Adrian started asking about her art, her mother, her dreams beyond the contract. When her painting supplies arrived one morning with a note, "Every deal deserves a creative clause," Lena laughed for the first time in weeks. Yet even as warmth crept into the cold corners of their arrangement, she reminded herself of the rules. No emotions, no illusions. She repeated the lines silently like a prayer, even when his hand brushed hers in the car, even when he remembered her mother's checkup date without being told. One rainy Saturday, during a photo shoot for a lifestyle magazine, the photographer asked Adrian to put his arm around her. "Closer," the man insisted. "Pretend you are in love." Lena froze, but Adrian leaned in, his hand resting gently on her waist. His breath brushed her ear as he whispered, "Pretend." But the word felt false, because her pulse was not pretending. The camera flashed, capturing something that neither of them was ready to name. That night, as she wiped off her makeup in the guest bathroom, Lena caught her reflection dressed in diamonds, smiling like a stranger. She whispered to herself, "It is just a contract." But when she heard footsteps behind her and Adrian's voice saying, "You looked beautiful tonight," the lie trembled. She turned, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "Beautiful is not in the contract," she said, trying to sound amused. "Neither is honesty," he replied quietly. The silence that followed was charged, electric. For the first time, Lena wondered if the rules that kept them safe were starting to break them instead. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, echoing the storm that was now quietly growing between a billionaire who never believed in love and a woman who had never been paid to pretend until now. The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to real life. Lena and Adrian attended charity luncheons, business galas, and interviews that painted them as the perfect power couple. But behind every flash of a camera, behind every rehearsed smile, a quiet shift was happening. Adrian had started letting his guard down. He laughed more, and sometimes when he looked at her, his gaze softened in a way that felt unguarded, almost tender. One evening, after a long meeting with the board, Adrian came home late. Lena had fallen asleep on the couch, surrounded by sketch papers and open paint tubes. The TV flickered quietly with an old black-and-white movie. He stood there for a moment, watching her chest rise and fall, the faint traces of color on her fingers, and something inside him loosened. He carefully placed a blanket over her shoulders and whispered to no one in particular, "You do not belong in this cage." The next morning, Lena found the blanket and smiled without asking questions. She cooked breakfast, something simple, eggs and toast, and Adrian joined her at the kitchen island, looking almost normal without a suit. "You made breakfast?" he asked, surprised. "Well," she replied, "I figured billionaires need to eat too." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You know, I do not think anyone has ever cooked for me before." "That explains the personality," she teased, and he laughed, really laughed. It echoed through the marble halls like sunlight through glass. That laugh carried into their public appearances. Reporters noticed. Articles changed tone from skepticism to fascination. Headlines read, "The Billionaire and the Artist Wife, Real Love or Perfect PR." The more they denied, the more people believed. One night, after a foundation event, they drove back through the city, lights streaking across the tinted car windows. "You handled that journalist well," Adrian said. "He was fishing for gossip." Lena smiled faintly. "You hired me to play a role. I am just doing my job." "That is the problem," he said softly. "You do it too well." She looked out the window, heart pounding. "Then maybe you should fire me." "I tried," he admitted. "But you keep proving why I cannot." Silence settled between them, heavy with everything unsaid. The next evening, a storm rolled over the coast. Adrian found her in the glass conservatory, painting as rain slid down the windows. "You like the rain," he observed. "It does not expect anything from me," she replied without turning. He stepped closer, his reflection merging with hers in the glass. "And what do you expect from this?" She finally faced him, brush still in hand. 6 months, she said quietly. "No more, no less." He nodded but did not move away. "Then I will make every day count." For a moment the world felt small, just rain, breath, and two people who were supposed to be pretending. He reached out and gently brushed a streak of paint from her cheek. "You missed a spot," he murmured. Her pulse raced, and for once she did not step back. Outside, thunder rolled, but inside the glass walls, the air had shifted into something warmer, riskier. By the end of that night, both of them knew the line between contract and connection had started to blur. Later, as Lena lay awake in the guest room staring at the ceiling, she whispered to herself, "You cannot fall for him. This is not your world." But in the room across the hall, Adrian sat in the dark, running his thumb over the corner of the marriage contract. wondering when the words on paper had begun to feel like a promise. By the middle of autumn, Lena had become the quiet heartbeat of Adrian's world. Their partnership, once built on cold signatures, had turned into something that neither could fully define. The press called them inseparable, and for the first time, Adrian stopped correcting them. Yet deep down, both knew the illusion could not last forever. It was a crisp Friday evening when they attended the annual Veil Foundation Gala, the very event where they had first crossed paths months ago. The ballroom gleamed with crystal chandeliers and gilded mirrors, but Lena felt a strange nostalgia, remembering the night she had mistaken him for a waiter. Tonight she was no longer invisible. Cameras followed her every step, and whispers of admiration trailed in her wake. Adrian stood beside her, poised and proud, but there was warmth in his eyes that did not belong to a performance. "You look radiant," he murmured. "Careful," she replied softly. "Someone might think you mean it." "What if I do?" His voice carried a gravity that made her chest tighten. Before she could answer, a journalist approached with a microphone. "Mr. Vale, Mrs. Vale," the woman said brightly, "you two are the story of the year. Tell us, what is the secret to such perfect chemistry?" Lena smiled politely. "Mutual respect," she said, steadying her voice. "And coffee. A lot of coffee." The crowd laughed, the moment light and charming, but Adrian's hand stayed on the small of her back longer than necessary. When the interview ended, they retreated to a quieter corner near the balcony. Below them, the city glittered like a field of stars. "We should probably keep some distance," Lena said quietly. "People are starting to believe this is real." Adrian's gaze held hers. "And if it is?" She swallowed hard. "Do not make this harder than it already is." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I am trying to make it honest." Before either could say another word, a camera flash burst behind them. The same journalist who had interviewed them stood at the doorway, grinning. "Beautiful shot," she said. "Mind if we use it for the morning issue?" Adrian's jaw tightened, but he smiled for the sake of decorum. Later that night, when the last guests had left and the ballroom lights dimmed, Lena sat on the edge of the stage, slipping off her heels. Adrian approached with 2 glasses of champagne. "For surviving the evening?" he said, handing her one. "Barely," she laughed. They clinked glasses. The sound was soft, fragile. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" she asked. "Every day," he admitted. "But lately, I have stopped pretending with you." Her breath caught. The music from the lobby drifted through the doors, a slow, haunting melody. Adrian set his glass down and extended his hand. "Dance with me," he said. "There is no one left to impress." She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. They moved slowly, almost cautiously, beneath the fading glow of chandeliers. It was not graceful, not practiced, but it was real. When the song ended, Adrian whispered near her ear, "Tell me you do not feel it." She wanted to lie, to protect them both, but her voice betrayed her. "I do." The moment stretched until the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, from across the hall, a sharp voice shattered it. "Adrian." A man in a tailored gray suit stepped into the light. Marcus Vale, Adrian's cousin and member of the board. His expression was cold. "Interesting. So this is the woman who supposedly saved the Vale legacy." Lena froze. Adrian straightened, his tone clipped. "Not now, Marcus." "Oh, but I think the board will want to know that your marriage is nothing more than a PR stunt." Marcus's smirk widened. "Imagine the headlines." Adrian's shoulders stiffened as security lights flickered. Lena felt the air shift from warmth to panic. The secret they had guarded for months was now seconds from exposure. And for the first time, she realized that falling for him had never been the real danger. The real danger was what would happen when the truth came out. The next morning, the news exploded like wildfire. Headlines screamed across every major outlet. "Fake marriage scandal at Vale Group." Photos from the gala filled the screens. Lena and Adrian on the balcony, his hand around her waist, her gaze full of something that looked far too real to be staged. By noon, reporters camped outside the gates of the Vale estate, shouting questions that cut through the autumn air. "Mr. Vale, was it all an act? Mrs. Vale, were you paid to marry him?" Inside the mansion, silence reigned. Lena sat at the dining table, staring at the untouched breakfast and the contract that now felt like a weapon. Adrian stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved in stone. "Call an emergency meeting," he said sharply. "No statements yet." When he hung up, Lena whispered, "It was Marcus, was it not?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "He has been waiting for this." He wants control of the foundation, and now he has leverage. Because of me, she said quietly. Because I said yes. Do not do that, he snapped, then sighed, his voice softening. This is not your fault. She rose from her chair. It is. You were right when you said I was too good at pretending. Her eyes shimmered. Now everyone thinks that is all I am. Before he could respond, she turned and left the room. Hours later, Lena sat alone in the guest house behind the estate, clutching a sketchbook she had not touched in weeks. Outside, reporters still shouted her name, their voices blending with the wind. On the third page of her sketchbook was a charcoal drawing of Adrian, his guarded eyes, the faint sadness he always tried to hide. She closed it quickly, as if ashamed. That night, Adrian found her there. The storm outside had calmed, but tension hung in the air like smoke. You should not be alone, he said softly. I am not your responsibility, she replied. The contract says otherwise. She looked up at him, tired and raw. Do you even know where the line is anymore, Adrian? Between duty and feeling? He took a slow breath. I know what I feel. I just do not know what to do with it. He sat across from her. The board wants me to end this, to announce a separation, maybe even an annulment. It would protect the company. And what would it do to you? It would destroy me, he admitted quietly. Because for the first time in years, I finally found something that felt real. Her voice cracked. Then say it is real. If I do, they will come for you, he said. Marcus will tear you apart to get to me. She shook her head. He already has. The silence stretched between them until he reached out, taking her hand. Lena, I can fix this. Trust me. She pulled her hand away. You cannot fix what was never meant to be broken. You made a deal, and I was part of it. She stood, her voice trembling. I cannot be part of your survival plan anymore. Adrian rose, but she was already walking toward the door. Lena, please. Goodbye, Adrian. The door closed softly, leaving him alone with the sound of his own breathing. The next day, the Vale Group released an official statement confirming that Adrian and his wife were taking time apart. The company's stock wavered, the media frenzy intensified, and Marcus smiled from his corner office, already preparing his move to seize the CEO seat. Meanwhile, Lena disappeared from the spotlight. She rented a small apartment downtown, returned to painting, and tried to forget the man who had taught her that love could feel both like salvation and like ruin. But some nights, when the city was quiet and the moonlight spilled across her studio floor, she still caught herself whispering his name. Across town, in his darkened office, Adrian sat alone, staring at the broken marriage contract on his desk. The ink had faded slightly, but her signature was still there, a ghost of the woman who had turned his deal into something dangerously close to love. 2 weeks passed, and the city had already found a new scandal to devour. But for Adrian Vale, the silence was worse than the noise. Every corner of his estate felt empty without her laughter echoing against the marble walls. His assistant tried to fill the silence with reports, meetings, and numbers, but nothing drowned out the ache. The board of directors gathered one cold morning, their expressions sharp and expectant. Marcus sat at the head of the table, his smile smug. You have embarrassed this company enough, Marcus said smoothly. The foundation's reputation is on the line. Step down gracefully, Adrian, or we will vote you out. Adrian's jaw clenched. You mean you will take what you have always wanted? Marcus leaned back, smugness dripping from every word. You handed it to me the moment you married that waitress. Adrian's temper flared, but before he could respond, he caught sight of the photograph on the wall, the same picture of his parents that Lena had seen months earlier. It reminded him of something she had said, You do not need to play a role to deserve love. He took a deep breath, his voice calm but cold. Do what you have to do, Marcus. But I will not apologize for choosing something real. The room fell silent. Later that day, Adrian walked through the city alone. No driver, no security. He found himself outside the small art gallery near the river where local painters displayed their work. Through the glass, he saw her. Lena stood beside an easel, a streak of paint across her cheek, talking to a group of visitors. She looked alive in a way she had not when surrounded by luxury. Adrian hesitated, torn between pride and longing. A small canvas caught his eye. It was a painting of 2 hands reaching through a sheet of rain, his hand and hers, unmistakably. The title read, 6 months. The realization hit him like a blow. Every color, every line, every drop of rain was a piece of their story. He stepped inside quietly. Lena turned, startled. For a moment neither spoke. "You should not be here," she said softly. "I had to see you," he replied. "Your work, it is beautiful." "It is not for sale," she said quickly. "I did not come to buy it." His voice softened. "I came to tell you that Marcus is trying to take the foundation. He thinks he has won, but I am done hiding." "What does that mean?" she asked, her heart pounding. "It means I am going to tell the truth. About us. About everything." She shook her head. "You will destroy yourself." "Maybe," Adrian said. "But if I lose everything, at least it will be on my terms." He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I cannot fix what I broke, Lena, but I can stop pretending that you were ever part of a lie." She looked at him for a long moment, the weight of all their mistakes between them. Then she said quietly, "Do what you have to do, Adrian. But do it for yourself, not for me." He nodded slowly. "Maybe it is the same thing now." And as he left the gallery, the reflection of the rain on the glass made it look as if both of them were still standing there, two people caught between love and redemption, waiting for the truth to finally set them free. The next morning, the Vale Group boardroom was filled with reporters, cameras, and executives buzzing with curiosity. Marcus stood at the podium, perfectly rehearsed, ready to deliver the final blow. "Due to recent revelations," he began, "the board has decided to remove Adrian Vale from his position effective immediately." But before he could continue, the doors opened, and Adrian walked in, every step steady, his presence commanding silence. The cameras turned instantly toward him. "Not so fast," Adrian said calmly. Marcus's smirk faltered. "Adrian, this is a closed meeting." "Then you should not have invited the press," Adrian replied. He faced the cameras. "If there is going to be a story, let it be the truth." Murmurs filled the room. Adrian continued, his voice strong but steady. "Yes, my marriage began as an arrangement. I was desperate to protect the foundation my parents built, and I made a choice that was wrong in its intent, but right in its outcome. Because through that mistake, I found something real. The woman you have all mocked taught me more about integrity than this entire board combined." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "You are confessing fraud on live television?" "No," Adrian said, turning to the reporters. "I am confessing love." The words hung in the air, sharp and quiet. "I will step down if that is what the board wants, but I will not apologize for her or for what we built together." He set a document on the table. "This is proof that Marcus Vale has been siphoning funds from the foundation for personal accounts overseas. That is the real scandal." Gasps filled the room as journalists surged forward. Marcus went pale, grabbing for the papers, but Adrian's security stepped in. "You think anyone will believe you?" Marcus hissed. "They already do," Adrian said, nodding toward the cameras. "Because I am not hiding anymore." As security escorted Marcus out, the room erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions, but Adrian simply raised a hand. "No further comment," he said, then turned and walked away, leaving behind the world that had once defined him. Outside, the sky was overcast, the wind sharp against his face, but for the first time in years, he felt light. Later that day, a live broadcast aired across every major network, Adrian Vale clearing his name, exposing corruption, and admitting that the woman who had changed his life was not a fraud but his truth. Across the city, Lena watched from her small apartment. Her hands trembled as she turned up the volume. When he said her name, her breath caught. "Lena Hayes taught me that love cannot be negotiated. It can only be earned," Adrian said. The screen blurred as tears filled her eyes. She turned off the television and sat in silence, her heart a mixture of disbelief and longing. The contract was gone, the lies were gone, and for the first time, there was nothing standing between them but choice. She closed her eyes, whispering to the quiet room, "Maybe this time we both choose the same thing." Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft and steady, as if the city itself was washing away the past, preparing for something new. 1 month later, the city had moved on. But for Lena, life had finally begun to feel like her own again. Her art gallery had gained attention after Adrian's public confession, and she spent her days painting and teaching local students who could not afford lessons. She no longer lived in luxury, but every brushstroke carried peace instead of fear. One rainy afternoon, as she was closing the studio, she heard the soft chime of the doorbell. When she looked up, he was there, Adrian Vale, standing in the doorway, his hair damp from the rain, no entourage, no suit, just the man she had fallen for without realizing it. "You are supposed to be rebuilding an empire," she said gently, trying to steady her breath. "Empires can wait," he replied. "But I could not wait any longer to see you." She smiled faintly, trying to hide the tears that burned behind her eyes. "You should not be here," she whispered. "Everyone already thinks." "Let them think," he interrupted softly. "I have lived my whole life for appearances. I am done pretending." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, weathered at the edges. "Do you remember this?" She frowned, recognizing the document inside their marriage contract, folded and worn. "I thought you destroyed it." "I kept it," he said. "A reminder of how we started. But I am not here to talk about contracts." He tore the paper in half, the sound sharp but liberating. Then he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a simple gold band. "No deals, no rules, no signatures," he said quietly. "Just me asking you, not as a businessman, not as a man trying to fix his life, but as someone who finally understands what love means. Will you marry me for real this time?" Lena's hands trembled as she covered her mouth. For a long moment, all she could hear was the rain and the echo of her heartbeat. Then she whispered, "Yes." Adrian smiled, relief and wonder crossing his face. He slid the ring onto her finger, and she laughed through her tears. "You realize we still do not have a venue," she said between breaths. "We do not need one," he replied. "We already have everything that matters." Weeks later, in the same art gallery where she had rebuilt her life, they held a small ceremony surrounded by friends, artists, and the staff from the foundation that had once nearly fallen apart. No reporters, no flashing lights, just warmth, laughter, and a quiet sense of home. As they exchanged vows, Lena glanced toward the window. The rain had stopped, and sunlight filtered through the glass, scattering across the room like liquid gold. Adrian took her hands and said softly, "The best mistake I ever made was meeting you." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then let us never stop making mistakes together." When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. But for them, it felt like silence, just two hearts beating in time. Outside, the city moved on. But inside that little gallery, love had rewritten its own contract, one made not of paper or signatures, but of trust, forgiveness, and a promise to never pretend again.